next on the list?
All right, let's keep this party going. Is single print synonymous with fair value gap? Great question. Um, so yes, and I would say, meaning if you are on a TPO chart and you have single prints, let's find some here, right, where we traded only one. This is hard to see without blowing these out, but each let's do it this way. Let's just do it. Letters, blacks on column. So each one of these lines is 30 minutes. Okay. 30 minutes of trading. So when I blow this thing apart like that, you can see 30 minutes down, 30 minutes down, a little bit of balance, and then this break. Well, this break right here, this is a 30-minute fair value gap, right? Because from the close of this candle to the open of this candle, there's no there's nothing overlapping here, right? So it's a space. That is the width of the fair value gap from the wick of this candle to the wick of this one. However, when you collapse it, you get the single print, which takes into account everything that happened leading up and after, and it's going to be a much smaller. It's going to be typically a much smaller range. So
Wait, what do you mean you just collapsed it?
yeah,
What just happened?
yeah.
Can you go back?
So this is a TPO chart, which means it's a time-based chart, but instead of viewing the candles all stretched out along the day, um, width-wise, we're taking them and smushing them all together and pretending like they just happened one right after the other, and we're looking at the excursion and the time spent. Now, that is what gives it this look. But then also I can blow it apart, and then it looks a little more like a normal chart if I really make it big. So this would be 30-minute chart for the day. If you put a 30-minute chart up, it would look very similar.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
And so a 30-minute fair value gap would be the low of this block to the high of this block, because there's this gap in activity with nothing overlapping. So a fair value gap is going to typically be a wider range. Single prints are going to be the dead nut, like the middle of a fair value gap, which typically a fair value gap, the midpoint is where you want to execute if you're trading that style. So if we blast this back together, you can see that the single prints is only a 7-point, 8-point range. And if we blow these apart, it's like a 40-point range. So this is the fair value gap, and this is the single print. So it's just a more detailed way of looking at it. Now, this is on a 30-minute time frame. You could take it to a 5-minute. It's going to be the same general idea. So they're similar in nature, how they're created, and they're similar in location. There's always going to be a single print where there's not always going to be a single print where there's a fair value gap. Single prints are a little more structural in nature, and it takes a little more to make one during a day. For instance, there's probably a fair value gap somewhere in one of these insets, but there's not going to be single prints there. Yeah, so there's a
Do
fair
you
there.
value single prints more in your general trading strategy than
I
fair value gap?
I look at single prints. They're almost always synonymous with low volume areas. You're not going to have a single print without a low volume area. So I think of single prints. I don't really talk about them much. I notice them, and they're kind of probably rolling around in the back of my mind, but I'm not really valuing either too much over the other. I like to consider them both. I would say single prints on a TPO chart matter more to me than a fair value gap. But just because of what it takes to create single prints, would be much less trading through an area than a fair value gap. Again, because like here we have no single prints, but we do have a fair value gap that formed there. They both I'll tell you this, they both point you into the same idea that there was an initiative move out of an area. A single print is just another way to quantify initiation, like strong buying, and they're meant to be filled, right, Banks?